Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere cold, wet, and dangerously undercooked. Imagine waking up to the sound of rain, not gentle, cozy rain, but months of endless, pounding downpour. It's 1316, you're in Northern Europe, and the skies have been weeping since spring. The fields? Flooded. The crops? Rotting. Your village granary? More rats than grain. And your family's last loaf of bread is sporting a healthy fuzz of green. You take one sniff and instantly regret it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the sodden path, mud sucking at your ankles like it's hungry too. And it might be. The year 1316 marks the second brutal blow of the Great Famine, and if you're alive right now, you're hungry. Not a skipped lunch kind of hungry. We're talking hollow-eyed, chewing on tree bark, eating your own leather shoes hungry. Your village's cows died off weeks ago. Too wet, too cold, and too little to eat. Milk? Gone. Rare as gold. You remember when pigs squealed from the pen? Now it's eerily quiet. Your neighbors tried boiling weeds, but even those ran out. And now, brace yourself, rumors are swirling that a town 2 days walk away just executed a woman for cutting meat from a body in the churchyard. Historians still argue whether widespread cannibalism actually happened, but you've heard whispers. You're not sure what's worse, the thought of someone doing that, or the quiet, gnawing part of you that wonders if you'd have the guts. You wake up each day hoping for a scrap of dry bread or an acorn stew that won't make your belly twist. If you're lucky, a priest mumbles a damp sermon about God's testing patience. If you're really lucky, no one dies during it. The rain isn't just annoying, it's destroying everything. Harvests have failed for 2 straight years. The little ice age is creeping in, bringing cooler temperatures and freakish storms. Crops drown in the fields or fail to grow at all. And when something does sprout, it molds faster than your uncle's toenails. Your teeth chatter through your patched-up tunic. The fires won't light because the wood's wet, and you're down to burning animal dung for warmth. Fun fact, people genuinely did this, though the aroma was distinctive. You haven't smelled clean air since last year. Your dad mutters about selling the old brass ladle for a cup of grain in the next town. You want to protest, but you're too tired. Even talking feels like a luxury. Children aren't spared. In fact, they're hit hardest. Babies stop crying after a while, and the silence is somehow worse. You remember your little sister's chubby cheeks from last winter. She's thinner now, quieter. You're scared to count ribs. Sometimes you find mushrooms or nuts in the forest and there's a moment of hope, until you remember the story of that guy who mistook hemlock for wild parsley. Spoiler, he didn't come back. Food prices have skyrocketed. What cost a penny last year now costs 10. Nobles still feast behind thick stone walls, but out here in the fields? You trade a boot for a stale onion. And you've seen people do it. Quirky tidbit incoming. In this era, some folks believed famine came from planetary misalignment. Yep, Saturn did it. Others blamed sin, witches, or angry saints. Anything but bad weather and worse farming logistics. You might try begging at a monastery. The monks give you a ladle of thin gruel, their eyes darting as if you'll steal their sandals. You thank them with cracked lips and pray they'll take pity on your little sister too. She stopped speaking. At night, you curl beneath damp straw. There's no privacy. Your whole family crams into a one-room cottage that smells of smoke, mildew, and despair. You dream of warm bread and apples. You wake to your stomach eating itself. Sometimes you hear bells tolling from neighboring villages. Not for celebration, never that anymore. It's death again. A baby gone. An old man collapsed mid-prayer. A mother didn't wake up. The bell tolls 3 times, then silence. The quiet hurts. You might think, surely this can't last forever, and you'd be right. But the price of survival is high. The year 1316 alone sees hundreds of thousands die across Europe. Crops continue to fail into 1317. By 1322, the worst is over, but the damage is deep. Your bones remember the hunger. Your mind does too. That gnawing fear doesn't go away just because the sun shines one afternoon. And the thing is, you don't even know the worst is yet to come. Because just as people start planting again, just as babies begin crying again, something darker is on the horizon. A silent ship, a creeping cough, a black blotch on a farmer's neck. But that's not tonight's problem. Tonight it's still raining. Your stomach growls in the dark. You hear the ship before you see it. Wooden hull creaking, ropes groaning in the harbor wind. It's 1347 and you're now in Messina, Sicily, a port town that should feel alive with trade and salt air chatter. But the dock is too quiet. People are whispering, not waving. Sailors lean over the side of a moored vessel, pale and slack-jawed, like they've seen the devil himself. Maybe they have. You edge closer, bad idea, and someone on the pier mutters, "They're all sick, dying." Then you notice, dead crewmen lie heaped on the deck like sacks of grain. One has dark swellings along his neck. Another's skin is mottled, stretched thin over bones like melted wax. The stench isn't just seawater and fish, it's something thick, sickly, rotting. Like death has moved in permanently. And congratulations, you've just witnessed the first European stop of what will soon be known as the Black Death. You probably won't survive this. The disease moves faster than anything you've ever seen. Within weeks, it jumps from town to town, sailing up rivers, slipping through trade routes, and hitching rides on flea-bitten rats. Spoiler alert, those rats are everywhere. On ships, in granaries, under beds. You once thought of them as annoying. Now they're apocalypse mice. It starts with a fever, then chills, then the swellings, black, golf ball-sized lumps that sprout in your groin and armpits. They ache, they leak, they kill. If that wasn't charming enough, many also get internal bleeding, vomiting, and what doctors call a rosary of black spots across the body. You call it nightmare fuel. Historians still argue whether it was purely bubonic plague or a deadly cocktail of diseases. Whatever it is, it doesn't care if you're rich or poor. Though let's be real, the poor drop like flies first. No castles, no escape. You try to avoid crowds. Doesn't matter. The baker's daughter sneezed yesterday, and today her house is boarded shut. No one has seen her mother. Her father was last spotted running toward the woods screaming, "God forgive me," with no pants on. Honestly, can't blame him. Quirky tidbit. Some people carry flowers or wear fragrant sachets to balance the air, convinced the plague spreads through foul smells. There's even a group who believe loud noises can drive it away. So now, every morning at dawn, a local noble hires trumpeters to blast horns over the rooftops. You do not appreciate this. You hear about plague doctors, those men in long robes and beaked masks. You picture them as wise saviors. Then you meet one. He smells of vinegar, pokes you with a stick, and mumbles something about bloodletting. You politely decline. Okay, you run. Others take a more spiritual approach. Flagellants march through town half naked, whipping themselves in rhythm, chanting that the plague is divine punishment. You watch them pass, leaving streaks of blood on the cobblestones. Your neighbor joins. She comes back with infected wounds. You avoid eye contact. Priests begin refusing last rites. Grave diggers charge 5 times the usual fee. When the pits fill, bodies are dumped into rivers or tossed outside the city walls. You gag at the smell when the wind changes. Worse still, dogs and pigs start scavenging, and suddenly those animals don't seem so friendly anymore. The death toll is staggering. Entire families vanish in days. Bells toll constantly, eventually they stop ringing altogether. What's the point? It's not like anyone's left to listen. You attempt to flee inland. But the countryside isn't much better. Villages nail boards across their gates. Some throw rocks at you. You're now a walking threat no matter how healthy you feel. At one village well, a woman screams when she sees your shadow. There's a strange numbness that settles in over time. Grief runs out of places to go. You stop asking about certain friends. You stop looking in the direction of certain houses. Life becomes one long effort to not touch, not breathe, not die. And just when you think it can't get darker, rats again. More of them. Swarming in granaries, churches, homes. You see them dart across a bishop's altar mid-sermon. No one flinches. Strangely enough, a few towns seem spared. Milan, for instance, reportedly walls up infected households immediately, brick and all. Brutal but effective. Other towns try mass purges of beggars or accuse strangers of poisoning wells. Some blame lepers. Others blame Jews. And here the misery turns cruel. Pogroms erupt across parts of Europe. Entire Jewish communities are slaughtered or exiled, accused of starting the plague. You know deep down it's absurd. But fear doesn't care. It feeds on blame. It grows fat on panic. By the end, the numbers are staggering. Between 30 to 60% of Europe's population, dead. Think about that. Half your town. Every other friend. Gone. Some villages never recover. Others vanish entirely, reclaimed by ivy and crows. But you, somehow you make it. Maybe you had immunity. Maybe luck. Maybe you just hid in the woods long enough. Whatever the case, you emerge into a world quieter, emptier, and weirder than before. Streets are overgrown. Churches echo more. And the rats? Still running the show. You squint up at the sun one morning and realize it's not raining for once. There's a strange peace in the air. But don't get too cozy, because after plague comes the fallout. The suspicion, the starvation, the rebuilding. You survived, sure. But now you have to live in a world where death moved in, rearranged the furniture, and left the door open behind it. You're tired, bone tired, but you're alive. It's the early 1350s, and somehow you dodged the plague pits, the rat armies, and the kindly neighbor who may or may not have offered you soup with something extra in it. Your hair has thinned, your teeth are loose, and your dreams still smell like burning herbs and old blood. But hey, what's next? Well, now it's time to cure things. Because even though half the population is gone, the real medical advice is just getting warmed up. You don't get to heal peacefully. Oh no, you get treated. You wake one morning with a fever, not the plague, not this time. Maybe just bad fish, maybe stress, maybe life. Your mother immediately calls for the barber surgeon. That's right, the guy who cuts hair and hacks off limbs. Because in this century, one blade fits all. He arrives smelling of sweat and onions, lugging a sack of tools that include scissors, a saw, and what looks like a fireplace poker. He takes one look at you and mutters, "Humors are off." You try to protest. He's already heating up a metal cup. You're about to get bled. Mainstream historical fact. The dominant theory of medicine in the 14th century is the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Too much or too little of any causes illness, they say. Real scientific, real sharp. So the barber opens a vein in your arm. The blood trickles out slowly, then quickly. You feel dizzy. He nods. That's good. The sickness is leaving. You wonder if your life is also leaving. You pass out before you can ask. When you wake up, someone is holding a leech to your ankle. You groan. They cheer. You're on the mend apparently. Now, let's say the fever doesn't go away. You're moved to a bed stuffed with straw and sage, medieval hospital chic. A monk appears with a boiled onion and a pot of vinegar. He mashes the onion and smears it across your chest, muttering a prayer that rhymes. It's equal parts science, poetry, and wishful thinking. Some treatments involve pigeons. Others use crushed emeralds or powdered mummy, yes, actual ground-up Egyptian mummies, quirky tidbit, and 100% real. You lie there, sticky with various herbs and slightly afraid of what might happen if they run out of pigeons. But the most dramatic treatments? Oh, they belong to the flagellants. Remember them? The folks who think pain equals penance? They're still around. And now they're setting up camps in fields, chanting through the night, slapping their backs raw with knotted cords. You sneak a look once, just once. A man collapses mid-whip, foaming at the mouth. A demon leaves him, someone whispers. You're not so sure. Historians still argue whether these processions helped communities cope or made everything worse. Some say they united towns in collective suffering. Others say they spread the disease further, dragging infected robes from village to village. Meanwhile, you're stuck in the middle, scared to cough too loudly lest someone dunk you in vinegar and call it a baptism. You might try visiting a wise woman on the edge of town. She gives you a poultice of nettles and yarrow, tells you to sleep facing east, and warns you not to dream of crows. Her hut smells like mint and mildew. You feel slightly better after, though you're not sure if it's the herbs or the absence of leeches. She also gives you a charm, a little leather pouch with twigs, hair, and some Latin scribbled on a scrap of lambskin. You wear it around your neck. Can't hurt, right? One day you get brave enough to ask the priest why God allows this much suffering. He sighs, says it's all a test. You ask what the passing grade is. He doesn't answer. Instead, he gives you a candle and tells you to light it for Saint Sebastian. Later, you hear of another boy in town. His fever got worse. They tried trepanation on him. You know, that cheerful procedure where they drill a hole in your skull to release the evil. You don't know how that ended, but no one's seen him since. Cities try to set up rules to stop infection. Don't bury bodies near wells, burn the beds of the dead, avoid pigs in church. They sound smart, but by now, most people either follow these rules religiously or ignore them entirely. You see a man bathing in rose water while his wife sneezes herself to death in the next room. It's fine. Everything's fine. Sometimes, for fun, doctors diagnose illnesses based on astrology. Your fever? Mercury is in a bad house. Your headaches? Venus is displeased. You think maybe you're displeased, but no one asks your opinion. You begin to realize that survival has less to do with medicine and more to do with luck, isolation, and strong garlic. Garlic, by the way, is used for everything. Headaches, wounds, plague-proof breath. You reek, but so does everyone else. So it's almost fashionable. There are occasional bright moments. A monk invents a new way to boil wine with herbs, and suddenly a few patients recover. A merchant swears by mustard seed baths. You pretend to be cured just to avoid another leech. Eventually the fever lifts, or maybe it just gets bored. You hobble outside, pale and stiff, the charm pouch still tied around your neck. You survived again, somehow. But you walk a little slower now. You flinch when people sneeze. And whenever someone suggests cutting the sickness out, you run. Rain starts to fall again. Of course it does. You pull your cloak tighter and head back toward the woods. And you hope, just for once, that nothing else shows up by boat. You're 7 and you've just been handed your very own hoe. Not a toy, not a wooden sword, but a real iron farm tool. Happy birthday? Not quite. Because in this century, childhood doesn't come with cake or crayons. It comes with labor. You blink up at your father, calloused hands wrapped around his own hoe. He nods toward the field. The barley isn't going to weed itself, and neither are you. Welcome to medieval childhood, where fun involves dodging livestock, hauling buckets, and hoping your older cousin doesn't get you betrothed before your first adult tooth. There's no such thing as adolescence, at least not the modern kind. If you can stand, you can carry. If you can carry, you can work. And if you're a girl, you might also be married off before your next birthday, depending on how desperate your family is for a dowry goat. Mainstream historical fact: by the age of 7, most peasant children were doing regular agricultural work. Herding sheep, helping with harvest, tending gardens. You don't have weekends, and there's no school unless you're miraculously born near a monastery and your parents are unusually literate. Spoiler, you are not. Still, your imagination tries to make the best of it. You name the cows. You pretend the stream is a river of silver. You carve faces into potatoes and call them your friends. They're better listeners than most of the village boys anyway. You do have toys, technically. A carved wooden doll with one eye. A bundle of rags you kick around like a ball. Sometimes bones from dinner get reused as game pieces. Resourceful? Sure. A little creepy? Also yes. But then there are the stories. Oh, the bedtime stories. Your grandmother has a whole library in her head, and most of them involve wolves, witches, and children getting eaten for wandering too far into the woods. You listen wide-eyed as she describes a girl turned into a deer for stealing berries. You're not sure if it's true, but you haven't touched forest berries since. Quirky tidbit. In some parts of Europe, kids were told that if they misbehaved, fairies would sneak in at night and replace them with a changeling. A sickly, shrieking creature that would bring shame to the family. You once saw a baby wail nonstop for a week and overheard a neighbor whisper, "It's not hers anymore." You didn't sleep for 2 nights. You play near the church sometimes, chasing chickens through the graveyard until the priest yells. He doesn't like children. Or chickens. Or laughter, really. But your friend says he saw a skeleton walk last Tuesday, so you keep your distance anyway. One day, a cart comes through the village. It's a traveling craftsman, pulling behind him little wooden trinkets and painted spoons. You stare at the bright red and blue as if it's treasure. He lets you hold one. It's the first color you've seen that isn't brown in months. You wonder if he's a wizard. He gives you a whistle carved from bone and tells you not to blow it near the woods. Naturally, you blow it directly near the woods. Nothing happens. That night, though, your brother swears he heard footsteps outside. Slow. Dragging. You sleep with the whistle under your straw pillow. Historians still argue whether medieval childhood was shortened by necessity or simply different by design. Some say kids had joy and play and community, just with harder edges. Others argue children were treated like miniature adults in every way that mattered. You're too busy scrubbing soot off a cooking pot to debate. You help your mother rinse linens in the stream. They smell like lye and smoke, but when the wind blows just right, you pretend it's lavender. She sings sometimes, soft lullabies from her own girlhood. It's the only music you hear outside of church chants. A boy down the lane lost his sister to fever last month. You're not allowed to ask about it, but you see him talking to the air sometimes. You wonder if he sees her ghost. You wonder if she's still 7 or if you keep aging after death. Your cousin gets betrothed at 10. The man is 17 and smells like onions. They say it's a good match. He owns 2 pigs and a hat. Your cousin doesn't cry. You're not sure she knows she's allowed to. One morning, your brother breaks a jar of honey, a precious thing, hard-won from dangerous hives. Your father beats him with a stick while your mother watches, jaw clenched. You learn to step lightly, to move fast, to not drop jars. Still, there are flickers of joy. You race leaves in the stream, chasing them with sticks like miniature boats. You play knight and dragon with the neighbor boys, whacking each other with reeds. The village cat tolerates you enough to sit in your lap. What? And then there's the May festival. Flowers, dancing, music. You wear a crown of nettles because all the good flowers were taken, But you twirl anyway, barefoot in the mud. Someone plays a fiddle badly. Someone else burns meat on a spit. The air smells like smoke and green things. For an hour or two you feel almost magical. Then it rains. Of course. You huddle under your mother's shawl, soaked to the bone, and think about how nice it would be to be older. Grown-ups don't get scolded. Grown-ups get bread. But you don't know yet what grown-up life really means. You don't know about taxes or tithes or childbirth. You just know you want a whole loaf to yourself. And maybe a real toy, not a carved potato. You fall asleep that night to the sound of distant thunder and creaking roof beams. Your feet ache. Your hands are blistered. But for now you're still a child. And in this century that's both a blessing and a countdown. You wake to shouting, again. The kind that comes with pitchforks and the rustle of armor. A man in a boiled leather vest is yelling something about holy duty and unclean blood. You sigh. It's crusade season. Again. But this time, you're not being called to sail across continents in the name of Jerusalem. This is local. Your village, tiny mud brick, barely a dot on the bishop's map, is suddenly a target. Not from invading armies or plague this time, but from your own neighbors. Because welcome to the 14th century, where crusades aren't just exotic pilgrimages, they're down the road, muddy boot, my God is angrier than yours neighborhood brawls. Your local lord, bored or broke or both, has joined a minor crusade against a rival town 2 valleys over. You don't know the town. You don't care about the town. But someone there insulted the bishop's cousin or refused a tithe or wore green on a feast day, whatever the reason, it's war. Mainstream historical fact. While most people think of the Crusades as huge holy wars in the Middle East, there were dozens of smaller ones, Albigensian, Baltic, even peasant crusades, that targeted other Europeans, heretics, or anyone too poor to defend themselves. You're handed a rusted sword that looks suspiciously like a reworked scythe. Your training? A brief sermon and the phrase, aim for the gut. You're told that if you die in battle, your sins are wiped clean. You consider whether that includes stealing turnips last week. Hope so. A priest blesses your forehead with water that smells like mildew and barley wine. Your chainmail doesn't fit, and your helmet is a borrowed pot with holes poked in it. You march anyway. You reach the enemy town after 2 days of slogging through brambles and sheep fields. It's a lot like your village. Same stone chapel, same wooden fences, same terrified old women peeking through shutters. You hesitate. Then someone yells Deus Vult and charges. You follow because not following gets you stabbed from behind. What follows is not a glorious battle. It's chaos. Chickens flee. Fires spark. A cart rolls downhill and crushes a latrine. You slip in mud, at least you hope it's mud. The fighting ends quickly, mostly because everyone's exhausted and nobody can see through the smoke. You don't know if your side won. You do know your feet hurt, your nose is bleeding, and your sword broke when it hit a barrel. That night, you lie in a field with a few survivors eating hard cheese and old carrots. The crusade leader gives a speech about God's favor. Then he asks for donations to fund the next one. You roll over and pretend to sleep. Historians still argue whether these smaller crusades were truly religious or just political excuses for land grabs. You've stopped caring. It all feels like the same mud-covered coin. The powerful invent a reason to fight and the rest of you get caught in the middle. The next morning, a merchant offers to sell you a relic, a piece of St. George's toe preserved in wax. You don't have money, but he eyes your boots. You hand them over. Turns out the toe is just a chicken bone. Joke's on him. The boots had holes anyway. You limp home barefoot, wondering how many holy wars you're expected to survive. This is your second, and you've yet to see a single miracle. Unless you count surviving dinner last night. On your way back, you pass a burned-out farmhouse. There's a family huddled outside, wrapped in soot-covered shawls. A little girl stares at you with wide eyes, a crust of ash on her cheek. You give her the last of your carrot. She doesn't smile, just takes it. You understand. Quirky tidbit. In some of these smaller crusades, people believed that relics or saint bones could protect you in battle. Entire squads marched while chanting and holding toenails, knuckle bones, or bits of old cloth soaked in holy sweat. You once saw a man wear a fishbone necklace and swear it saved him. You weren't sure if it was faith or just coincidence. Maybe both. Back home, the village is quieter. Your friend Eurus didn't come back. Your cousin lost 2 fingers and now says he feels closer to God, in a weirdly cheerful way. The blacksmith has already started reforging farm tools from broken swords. You're expected to go back to work immediately. No medals, no feast. Just wheat to plant, thatch to fix, and a suspiciously bitey goose in the yard. You lie awake that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the creak of wind in the rafters. You wonder if God really noticed your little crusade. You wonder if he noticed any of it. Then you wonder if he's tired too. Just before you drift off, you hear a knock at the door. It's your uncle. Another crusade's brewing, this time against heretics in the mountains. He asks if you're ready to fight again. You close your eyes and pretend you didn't hear. It starts with a look, not a kind one. A long, narrow-eyed stare from the baker's wife as you pass her stall. You'd swear you didn't do anything wrong. But she saw you talking to that healer in the woods last week. The one who smells like rosemary and wears 27 belts. And now the whole village is looking at you sideways. You're about to be accused of witchcraft. Again. Welcome to the medieval paranoia parade, where every misfortune, broken egg, sour milk, stormy harvest, is probably someone's fault. And that someone? Often a woman. Bonus points if she's unmarried, opinionated, owns a cat, or just has a weird birthmark. Mainstream historical fact: witch trials weren't just a 1600s Puritan thing. By the late medieval period, especially post-plague, accusations were bubbling. The church hadn't standardized how to deal with suspected witches yet, but that didn't stop folks from dunking, poking, and burning. Someone's cow miscarried, another's beer spoiled, and someone swears their baby spoke Latin for half a second. Clearly, the devil walks among you. Or, more likely, among the poorer, isolated women just trying to get by. You, for instance. You drop your bucket at the well and mutter a curse under your breath. At the bucket, not anyone in particular. Unfortunately, old Marta hears you. She's 75, partially deaf, and known to accuse her own shadow of blasphemy. Within hours, half the town thinks your bucket hexed her. You are summoned before the village reeve. He squints at you. Have you ever spoken to a toad? You blink. No. He nods grimly. Suspicious. Now comes the trial. Well, trial is generous. It's more of a let's see if you drown event, hosted by the worst people you know. They bind your arms and legs and toss you into the river. If you sink, you're innocent but also dead. If you float, you're guilty and must be punished. It's the worst pool party ever. Quirky tidbit. In some places they rubbed accused witches with pig fat so they'd slide through the water more easily. Very scientific. Very greasy. You float. Unfortunately. They drag you out, cough sputtering and muddy, then haul you to the chapel for a second opinion. The priest lights incense and waves it near your face like it's bug spray. You sneeze. He frowns. Then comes the ducking stool, a charming contraption that involves tying you to a chair, dunking you repeatedly in a cold river until you confess, or stop struggling. Whichever comes first. You survive. Barely. Someone brings you broth afterward. You don't ask what's in it. Historians still argue whether these witch accusations were about religious fear or just a sneaky way to remove inconvenient people. Probably both. Either way, your social standing now hovers somewhere between outcast and swamp goblin. And it's not just women. Men get accused too, especially if they heal animals too well, brew suspiciously strong ale, or know Latin but aren't clergy. One man near your village got arrested for having too many books. You're not sure if that's a witch thing or just jealousy. One night, a girl from the next village is brought in on suspicion of flying. You imagine wings. Turns out she just climbed a tree too fast. Still, unnatural. She's now locked in a shed with 3 chickens and a very confused goat. Meanwhile, people wear charms to ward off hexes. Bits of bone, chunks of iron, dried flowers. One guy ties garlic to his shoes and insists he's completely unbewitchable. He also smells like soup. Your cat disappears for a few days. When she returns, you're relieved, until you hear someone call her familiar. You contemplate shaving her and pretending she's a hairless demon ferret. Might help. Might not. Eventually, your luck turns. A merchant's horse breaks loose and nearly flattens the reeve. You pull him out of the way at the last second. He calls it divine intervention. You call it basic reflexes. But hey, who's complaining? Your witch status drops slightly. Still, no one borrows your spoons anymore. One of your friends, quiet, kind, with a crooked smile, gets accused next. Her offense? Laughing too loudly during a funeral. The community decides that no decent person would laugh in sorrow. You try to defend her. You're warned to stop speaking or risk being next. The silence hurts more than the cold river ever did. The friend disappears. Her cottage is taken apart. Her cat, orange, fat, with a lazy eye, is now considered cursed. You feed him scraps behind your barn and pretend he's just a regular, unlucky tabby. You lie awake some nights wondering what would happen if you left. Walked into the forest and just kept going. Maybe there's a place where no one checks your feet for devil's marks. or asks if your mole looks like France. But for now you stay. You tend your herbs. You avoid muttering in public. And you definitely don't whistle during a thunderstorm ever again. Because in this world, bad luck is never just bad luck, it's someone's fault. And if you're a little different, a little quiet, or just unlucky enough to be nearby, it might be yours. You walk into the chapel and freeze, not from reverence but from what's on the walls. Skeletons dance with peasants. Flames lick the feet of kings. A nobleman stares in horror at his own decaying reflection, as a demon with a pig's head beckons him toward a blazing pit. These aren't Sunday school murals. These are doom paintings. And they're everywhere. You sit stiffly in the back pew trying to keep your eyes on the floor, but they pull you in. Saints in agony. Sinners boiling in cauldrons. Children wailing beside open graves. It's like someone took every nightmare you've ever had and turned it into wall art, brightly colored, meticulously detailed, and uncomfortably personal. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval churches across Europe painted doom murals, massive depictions of Judgment Day, right at the entrance or above the altar. The idea was simple. Remind everyone that death is coming and heaven isn't a given. You glance toward the pulpit. The priest is already going strong. And those who lie with animals shall be cast into the fire. And those who skip mass, fire. And those who question God's will, fire, fire forever. You wonder if breathing too loudly will get you fire. Outside life is bleak enough, but inside the church, it's worse. Because every sermon sounds like a countdown. And every sickness, flood, or blighted harvest is proof that you, yes you, are the reason God's so cranky. The priest pauses dramatically. Then he slams a fist on the pulpit. The devil walks among us. In your homes. In your fields. Even, perhaps, in your thoughts. You sink lower in your seat and try very hard not to think anything. Historians still argue whether these fiery sermons kept communities in line or genuinely offered spiritual comfort. Maybe both. But to you, they just feel like mental arson. You've spent most of your life on the verge of doom. Now it's just official. After the service, a woman hands you a parchment pamphlet. It's a crude woodcut of sinners falling into hell mouths shaped like wolves. You tuck it in your tunic out of politeness and immediately forget where it is. You'll find it 6 months later stuck to your foot. You walk home past the cemetery where someone's erected a new Danse Macabre display. Life-size skeletons carved from wood, holding hands with lords, monks, and children in a big, grim conga line. The message? Death doesn't care who you are. It leads everyone. Cheerful stuff. Quirky tidbit. In certain towns, people hired actors to perform death plays in public squares, grim little dramas where death shows up mid-feast to drag nobles away mid-bite. There were masks, costumes, and the occasional goose for comic relief. You once saw one with death dressed like a chicken. It was confusing, still terrifying. You pass a weaver mumbling to herself while dropping coins into a tiny shrine. She spits over her shoulder, mutters a rhyme, and prays that her son won't die before harvest. She's lost 3 children already. You don't ask what happened. You already know. The local bishop recently commissioned a new painting, St. Michael weighing souls on a giant balance beam. One soul clutches rosary beads. The other is weighed down by a pig, a coin, and, oddly, a shoe. You assume it's metaphorical. You still go home and hide your nicest shoes. Your little brother wakes you up one night in tears. He had a dream about a horned angel pointing at him. You hush him back to sleep and lie awake after, wondering if angels do point. And if so, why always at you? Some evenings, a preacher wanders into town. Not your regular priest, but a traveling firebrand with a booming voice and a fondness for yelling. He sets up near the market, climbs atop a barrel, and begins shouting about the sins of mankind. God is watching. Every lie, every stolen egg, every lustful glance. He sees it all. You hope he didn't see you steal that turnip. By the end of the speech, half the town is weeping, swearing off fun, and vowing to sleep on bare planks for a week. The preacher collects a few coins, promises the world's end is very close, and then moves on to the next town. You wonder if he's disappointed when the apocalypse doesn't happen. Later, you see a new addition to the chapel wall, a fresco of the 7 deadly sins. Each sin is personified and each has a matching punishment. Greed gets molten gold poured down his throat. Lust is mauled by toads. Sloth is eaten by snails. The details blur, but the lesson is clear. You're doomed for something. You start to notice everyone watching each other more closely. A girl who giggles too much? Probably wrath in disguise. A man with fancy boots? Pride. Your neighbor's donkey that walks too slowly? Definitely sloth. The paranoia isn't just for witches anymore, it's universal. One afternoon, you help an old woman carry her bundle of sticks. She stares at you afterward and whispers, "May your soul be light on the scales." You say thanks. Then you realize she meant after death. Comforting. You can't escape it. Doom is in the songs, the stories, the art, the dreams. Even lullabies carry warnings. Musical note, "Sleep, child, don't stray," or "Demons will play in the shadow of graves, where the dead softly lay." Musical note. You hum it to yourself sometimes, not even thinking. It's background noise, just like the bells tolling another death. Or the boy who fell from the hayloft and was buried the same day because, well, plague or not, the ground won't dig itself. Still, you find little ways to rebel. You carve a smiling face into the side of a skull painting. You wear 2 different shoes to Massachusetts. Once, you light a candle without praying first. Take that, judgment. But mostly you survive. You keep your head down. You memorize every inch of those painted skeletons until they almost feel like old friends. You pretend they're winking at you. Because in a world where doom is always watching, it helps to wink back. The harvest season arrives like a slow thunderstorm, promising plenty but delivering dread. You watch as your neighbors hack at swollen stalks of wheat, their faces smeared with sweat and dust. The land looks golden, but the promise of bounty feels thin, like trying to squeeze juice from a stone. This is a time when famine is just a whispered threat beneath every meal, an invisible predator waiting to pounce. The previous year's crop failed, and the year before that was barely better. This year the fields are patchy. You worry the soil is tired, the rain too sparse, or maybe even cursed. Mainstream historical fact. In medieval Europe, famines were devastatingly common. The Great Famine of 1315 to 1317 wiped out roughly 10 to 15% of the population in affected regions. Crop failures meant hunger, disease, and desperate times for everyone, rich and poor alike. You remember the town crier's grim announcement, "Grain prices rise. Bakers ration bread." The common folk whisper of the hungry year, as if it's a beast stalking the village. Quirky tidbit. In some places, people resorted to eating things you wouldn't expect, like ground bones, tree bark, or even, in whispered legends, mice. One grizzled farmer claims he once saw a man roasting rats by a fire and declared it the meat of the damned. You try not to judge. Hunger changes the menu. You trudge to the market with your small coin pouch clutched tight. The usual stalls offer less than before: shriveled vegetables, hard cheese, and that sad bread that tastes like old cardboard. The baker warns you with a grim smile, "Better make it last." The village children are thinner now. Your little brother's cheeks are sunken. You catch him staring at a loaf of bread like it's a treasure chest full of gold coins. You swallow a lump in your throat. Historians still argue whether medieval famines were caused more by natural climate shifts, like the Little Ice Age, or by poor agricultural practices and feudal demands. Probably a wicked mix of all 3. On your way back, you pass the miller's house, where a line of desperate faces waits for their daily ration of meager grain. A quarrel breaks out when the flour runs low, and someone shouts about cheating and hoarding. The miller shrugs, looking as helpless as the rest. One evening, the village priest offers a bleak sermon about patience and divine punishment. He quotes from scripture about the starving Israelites wandering the desert, as if that somehow makes your aching belly easier to bear. You pretend to listen. At night, you hear coughing from the cottages. Is the plague season again, or maybe just a harsh cold? No one has the strength to care. The weak fall first, then the children, then the elders. You wrap your brother in an old cloak, wishing you could protect him from this slow unraveling of life. You notice your neighbors growing more desperate, selling tools, livestock, even clothes for a scrap of coin. One widow trades her late husband's ring for a loaf of bread. You want to help but have little yourself. Quirky tidbit. In some villages, to keep spirits up, folks held feast days in the middle of famine, sharing whatever scraps they had and dancing in the fields. Historians still debate if these gatherings were acts of communal hope or reckless folly. One night, you dream of a feast. The table groans with roasted meat, fresh bread, and wine flowing like rivers. You reach out to grab a slice, but it vanishes, leaving only hunger. Back in the cold dawn, you find a stranger by the well. He's gaunt, with sunken eyes and a traveling cloak. He offers a strange herb bundle, whispering of secret cures and lands where food grows freely. You consider following him, but you have roots here, even if they're tangled in famine and fear. Your life is a balance on the edge of starvation. Every meal is a victory, every crumb a treasure. You watch the seasons turn, hoping the next will bring rain, growth, and relief. But deep down, you know survival is a gamble, and the odds aren't looking good. Winter sneaks in on silent, frosted feet, turning the world outside your window into a bleak, white tomb. The air bites through your thin cloak, and the frozen ground crunches beneath your boots as you trudge toward the village square. Smoke curls from chimneys, but the chill seeps through every crack and bone. Winter isn't just cold. It's a merciless test of will, food, and hope. You clutch your hands near the fire in your humble home, listening to the groans of your little brother as the fever takes hold again. Outside, the howling wind carries stories, whispers of neighbors gone missing, of livestock lost to the cold, of death lurking just beyond the frost. Mainstream historical fact: medieval winters were often brutal, especially during the onset of the Little Ice Age around the 14th century, which brought colder temperatures and shorter growing seasons, worsening famines and suffering. You sit close to the hearth, staring into the flames, while your mother tries to stretch the last of the salted pork into something edible. You remember the preacher's warnings that God uses winter to cleanse the soul, but it's hard to feel cleansed when your fingers are numb and your stomach empty. Quirky tidbit: some villagers believed that hanging a dead cat over the doorway would ward off evil winter spirits. You've never seen anyone brave enough to try it, but the rumor persists like frost on windows. Historians still argue whether this superstition was widespread or just a local oddity. The nights drag on forever. Every shadow in the flickering firelight seems alive, every creak of the house a ghost's whisper. You lie awake counting the cracks in the wooden ceiling, willing morning to come faster. The village healer uses herbs and prayers, but sometimes you wonder if it's just luck or the cold itself deciding who lives or dies. You watch neighbors gather around feeble fires, sharing stories of better days as if storytelling might warm their blood. One evening, a traveling bard arrives. His voice is scratchy and his lute strings are cracked, but he sings songs of distant lands where summers never end and food grows as plentiful as leaves. Children gather around, eyes wide, clutching their threadbare cloaks as if the stories might keep the cold away. You smile, despite yourself, imagining a place where you don't have to scrape frost from frozen potatoes or fear the snap of brittle bones in the night. Historians still argue whether these tales were pure escapism or secret codes for rebellion against despair. At the market, the few goods left are overpriced or spoiled. You barter a worn leather pouch for a handful of dried beans, enough for one small stew. The baker shakes his head, no new bread until spring if then. You notice the village's skeletal silhouette, the church tower leaning slightly, shutters hanging by rusted nails, faces etched with exhaustion. Even the animals seem quieter, conserving strength for the coming days. You see a man outside the tavern, wrapped in furs too thin for the wind. He tells a story of a merchant caravan lost to snowdrifts, their riches buried beneath mounds of white. You wonder if riches mean anything when frost eats everything alive. One night, you dream again, this time of green fields and warm sun. But the dream fades, replaced by the sharp taste of frozen air and the echo of distant church bells tolling for the dead. As you settle beneath threadbare blankets, you remind yourself, winter won't last forever. But you're not so sure it cares if you do. Spring arrives hesitantly, like a shy visitor unsure if it's welcome. The ice melts into muddy puddles, and the first shoots of green push through the brown earth, struggling for a breath of sun. You step outside, boots sinking into the wet soil, feeling the promise of life but sensing the scars left behind by winter's harsh rule. The village is quieter now. The fields are plowed, but fewer hands are there to work them. Some neighbors didn't survive the cold, others are too weak to lift a hoe. You help your mother plant seeds in the garden patch, hoping the earth will forgive this year's neglect. Mainstream historical fact: after particularly harsh winters and famines, medieval villages often faced severe labor shortages, which sometimes forced feudal lords to offer better terms to peasants or face rebellion. You remember the priest's last sermon before Easter, speaking of rebirth and hope. The words hang in the air, but it's hard to reconcile with empty stomachs and sick bodies. Still, the Easter feast is a small miracle: thin slices of bread, a bit of cheese, a rare egg. You savor every bite like it's ambrosia. Quirky tidbit: in some places, villagers celebrated the end of winter by smashing pots and banging drums, a noisy ritual to scare away the last of the cold spirits. You once tried banging a pot yourself but only succeeded in waking your grumpy dog. Historians still debate whether these noisy spring rituals were rooted in pagan traditions or simple communal celebrations of survival. The market begins to stir with life again, although goods remain scarce. You hear rumors of bandits preying on travelers, desperate for food or coin. The fear of human wolves is nearly as strong as that of actual wolves in the forest. You catch sight of the traveling merchant from last winter, now setting up a small stall with colorful cloth and rare spices. You wonder how he survives the winter's cruelty and what stories his eyes hide. The village children play again in muddy fields, their laughter a fragile thing. Your little brother runs after them, cheeks flushed with cold-tinged warmth. You're glad to see his smile return even if it's fleeting. But spring brings other worries too, swelling rivers from melting snow, threatening to flood low-lying homes. The mud makes travel slow and dangerous. And the fields, though planted, are vulnerable to late frosts and storms. You overhear talk of a coming festival to celebrate planting and the hope of a good harvest. It's a distraction, a balm for weary souls. You think back to the grim dances and death plays, wondering how long the joy will last. Quirky tidbit. In some villages, people would decorate eggs with symbols meant to protect crops and fertility. Some even hid tiny charms inside for luck. You once found a cracked egg with a carved wooden fish inside and thought it was a wizard's prank. You notice the village church has begun repairs. Stone workers chipping away at frostbitten mortar, carpenters replacing rotted beams. It feels like a sign that life, stubborn as ever, is pushing back against despair. You wonder what the coming months will bring. Will the earth be generous? Will the sun stay long enough to ripen crops? Or will another shadow fall, snuffing out this fragile flicker of hope? The answers hide just beneath the surface of the soil, waiting to reveal themselves in days to come. The first summer sun burns low and fierce, turning the village into a haze of dust and sweat. You wake early, the heat pressing down like an invisible weight, and trudge to the fields with aching muscles and parched lips. The promise of warmth feels more like a threat. Every drop of water is precious and precious little is left. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval summers were unpredictable, with droughts just as deadly as floods, often leading to crop failures and spreading disease through weakened populations. The crops wave in the dry wind, brittle and brown around the edges. You scan the horizon for clouds, but the sky stretches empty and merciless. You wonder how the plants survive, how your neighbors manage to hold on to hope when the earth itself seems to be giving up. Quirky tidbit. Some villagers carried little bells or charms made from bones to ward off summer sickness, a catch-all term for the fevers and illnesses that thrived in the heat. You tried wearing one once, but it jingled so much you almost got kicked out of the chapel. Historians still argue whether these superstitions were rooted more in fear of disease or in old pagan practices disguised by new faith. Water is a scarce treasure. The village well runs low, and the stream you used to splash in as a child is now a trickle, lined with cracked mud. You hear of nearby villages already abandoning their homes, wandering in search of better lands. You and your mother ration water carefully, washing only when necessary, and storing any collected morning dew on cloths. You marvel at the strange beauty of drops glistening like tiny jewels in the harsh sun. The market is quieter too. The merchants speak in hushed tones about failing trade routes, bandits, and starvation. You barter a handful of dried herbs for a piece of salted fish, wondering if the salty taste will help keep you alive just a little longer. Quirky tidbit. Some folk believe that eating spicy peppers could sweat out poisons from the body, though they're hard to come by, and spicy food is more a dream than a reality for you. Historians still debate how widespread knowledge of spices was in rural medieval areas. Your brother spends more time by the riverbank, chasing dragonflies and making mud pies. You try to join him, but your body feels heavy and weak, as if the summer heat is draining your very soul. Still, his laughter is a balm to your weary heart. You catch sight of the old mill, standing silent and still. Without water to turn the wheel, the village grinds to a slow halt. Grain turns into dreams, unmilled and unusable. The village healer warns of illnesses spreading rapidly in the heat, dysentery, fevers, and mysterious rashes. You listen carefully to her remedies, but sometimes you think they are more rituals than cures. One night, the village gathers for a rare feast, scrawny chickens, tough bread, and thin wine watered down almost to nothing. The elders tell stories of past summers when the land was generous and the people were full. You watch the flickering faces, wondering if this summer will be the last chapter in your village's story or just another struggle in the long fight to survive. Historians still debate how much medieval people understood about disease transmission, especially in hot, crowded conditions like these. As the firelight flickers, you feel the heat pressing in, the weight of the world settling on your shoulders. But you also feel a stubborn spark inside, a quiet promise that you'll endure, somehow, even if it means swallowing a few more dry meals and chasing the sun's fading warmth. Autumn doesn't arrive so much as descend, like a closing curtain after a particularly grim performance. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of dead leaves, sour apples, and distant smoke. You tug your cloak tighter, the frayed edges whispering secrets of another cold creeping in. Harvest time has come, and with it, the judgment of the year. Mainstream historical fact. In the Middle Ages, the success or failure of the autumn harvest determined the community's survival. A poor yield meant a winter of starvation and desperation. You work from dawn until dusk, your fingers blistered, your back knotted with pain. The wheat is shorter than it should be. The turnips, small and bitter. Your family fills only half the storage shed, and you know deep in your bones that it won't be enough. But you say nothing. Not to your mother, who already wakes crying sometimes. Not to your little brother, who asks if there will be honey bread this winter. You just smile and ruffle his hair as if hope can be passed along like warmth. The trees explode into color, fiery reds, defiant golds, deep oranges, and for a moment the world feels almost generous. But you know better. Beauty in nature often comes before the bite, like a snake flashing its scales before it strikes. Quirky tidbit: some believe that if the squirrels gathered too early or in large numbers, it foretold a brutal winter. You've seen them everywhere lately, darting, digging, hoarding like they know something you don't. Historians still debate whether medieval folk genuinely believed in animal omens or used them as convenient excuses for events beyond their control. The village holds a small harvest festival anyway. Music echoes through the square, fiddles straining with joy they barely possess. Children dance in circles. Elders drink heavily. You taste a sweet mead that makes your head spin and your heart ache. A local bard sings a tune about the belly of the year, where all the land's secrets are stored, and either feed you or finish you. You glance around the firelight and try to calculate who will still be here by spring. You help your mother pickle vegetables and dry herbs, storing everything in clay jars sealed with wax. You press your ear to the lids, pretending you can hear the food hum quietly in anticipation. Quirky tidbit: in some places people carved faces into vegetables, particularly turnips, to frighten away hungry spirits drawn to meager stores. You once made one that looked like the village priest and had to hide it for fear of being accused of blasphemy. Historians still argue whether these customs were based in pagan rites or just seasonal mischief. The animals are restless. The goats bleat at night for no reason. The chickens stop laying eggs. A neighbor's cow gives birth too early and the calf doesn't make it. You hear him cursing in the dark, then praying twice as loud. You walk the edge of the forest with your brother, gathering nuts and mushrooms. Every rustle makes your pulse quicken. You're not afraid of wolves, at least not the four-legged kind. A traveler passes through with news: war to the south, plague to the west, and something called tax reassessment to the north. You laugh bitterly. There's nothing left to reassess. You can't tax dust. Back at home, you run your hand across the cool stone walls, memorizing the feel of shelter. You light one candle at a time, too poor for more. The flame dances, defiant but small. Harvest has passed. The food is counted. The stories are beginning to shrink in tone and stretch in meaning. Soon it will be time to listen, not for joy but for survival. The first frost doesn't warn you, it simply appears overnight, painting the world in brittle white lace. You wake to find your breath clouding the air inside your own home, and for a moment, you can't tell if you're alive or trapped in some silent underworld. The hearth crackles feebly. You hold your hands over it, but the heat barely reaches your skin. Mainstream historical fact: in medieval Europe, homes were poorly insulated. Even with a fire burning, the temperature inside could dip close to freezing during winter nights. You help your mother stuff rags in the window gaps, straw in the floorboards. Still, the wind finds a way in, whistling like it's got gossip to share. Your little brother sneezes every few minutes. You pretend it's nothing. The healer is too sick herself now to visit anyone. There's a desperate quiet across the village. No more hammering or barking dogs. Just the soft crunch of snow under boots and the creaking of strained wood. Each morning you check the food storage. Each time it looks a little smaller. Even the pickled things have begun to lose their charm. Quirky tidbit: some families hung onions from their ceilings not for cooking but as winter wards to protect against spirits or illness. Yours has 3, one of them already sprouting like it wants to escape. Historians still debate whether these household charms were symbolic, medicinal, or just good excuses for bad smells. You go days without seeing your neighbors. One morning you find out the baker's son froze to death walking home from his aunt's house. Just a 15-minute walk. He never made it. The path is now a narrow trench in the snow. No one speaks of it above a whisper. At night, the cold deepens. You wrap yourself in everything you own. The candle flickers, but you can't bear to blow it out. You'd rather see the cold coming than feel it arrive in darkness. Your mother weeps quietly over a pot of thin stew. She doesn't know you hear her. You pretend not to. You just chew the same bite until it disappears. Sometimes you dream of summer, not the real one but a soft, golden one you've only ever felt in dreams. In it, the bread is warm, the air thick with honey, and no one is ever hungry or cold. You wake up shivering. The village priest still rings the church bell every Sunday. You go not for faith but for warmth. The building holds the heat of many bodies. You stand shoulder to shoulder with your neighbors, all of you pretending to sing while watching your breaths rise like smoke offerings. Quirky tidbit: some churches burn dried orange peels in winter services to cover the smell of the congregation. You've never seen an orange, but you imagine it must be a miracle fruit if it can fight off both smell and sin. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers attended church for spiritual comfort or social necessity, or simply to keep warm. Your little brother asks about Christmas. You tell him it's coming. He asks if St. Nicholas will visit. You pause. Then you say yes, but only if he stays strong. That night, you carve a small wooden animal, something that looks vaguely like a goat, and hide it in your shoe to discover later. The days shrink. The sun rises lazily and leaves in a hurry. You try to mark time, but it slips through your hands. Everything becomes a pattern of surviving. Patch the roof, shake out the straw, chase off the rats, whisper stories, and still the cold gets worse. The silence outside grows heavier. Wolves howl at night. Not many, but enough to remind you that you're still part of their world. That if you fall, nature will not hesitate. You sit by the fire and stare at its heart. There's something hypnotic in the way it burns, an ancient language you almost understand. One of hunger, one of endurance, one of waiting. The deep winter is a test of patience and quiet madness. Each day becomes a blurred copy of the last. Wake, shiver, chew something tasteless, shiver more, sleep. Even dreams feel stale now, like reused parchment. Time doesn't pass, freezes with you. Mainstream historical fact: in the 14th century, during the so-called Little Ice Age, average winter temperatures dropped dramatically across Europe, contributing to food shortages and increased mortality. Your boots crunch over snow that never seems to melt. The wind sings through the bare trees in a voice that doesn't care if you listen. You wrap a scarf around your mouth until your breath dampens the wool and freezes into tiny glass threads. No one talks about hunger anymore. It's become too ordinary. You all just do what must be done. Boil the same roots again, chew on bark like it might become bread, and keep the fire alive like it's the last voice in the world. The old widow who lives alone on the edge of the village hasn't been seen in a week. You and your mother take a pot of broth and knock at her door. It swings open with the wind. She's curled in a chair, quiet and unmoving. You set the pot down anyway and leave, closing the door behind you like a blessing. Quirky tidbit: some villagers believed knocking 3 times on the inside of a door after visiting the dead would keep their spirit from following you home. You do it just in case. Historians still debate whether these practices were survival rituals or grief responses misunderstood as superstition. The days get darker still. One morning, the sun doesn't show its face until nearly midday. When it does, it looks shy and thin, like it's embarrassed to have left you alone for so long. You begin counting icicles for fun. You give them names, pretend they're villagers too. That one's the blacksmith. That one's old Marcy. That one's me. You laugh a little too hard, and your mother watches you carefully for the rest of the evening. Quirky tidbit: some communities believed icicles hanging near windows could listen to your worries and would melt faster if your words were kind. You try whispering nice things to them. It helps. You catch your brother talking to the fire. Not praying, just talking, like it's a friend. You let him. Honestly, you wish it would talk back. At night, everything creaks. The roof, the beams, your joints. You lie still, bundled like a forgotten parcel, and feel the cold not just on your skin but in your bones, like you've become part of the winter yourself. There's a particular kind of quiet in these days. Not peaceful, just still. You can hear your own heartbeat in it. Sometimes you're not sure if it's relief or dread. The snow outside your door is waist high now. No one digs paths anymore. They just walk over the frozen crust and hope for the best. A few children tried sledding down the church roof last week. The priest called it blasphemy, then tried it himself after nightfall. Historians still argue whether cabin fever was a recognized phenomenon in the Middle Ages or just another layer of daily struggle. You watch your mother scrape the bottom of a barrel for the last spoon of dried peas. She mutters something, maybe a prayer, maybe a curse. You don't ask. You go out once a day to chop wood. The axe feels heavier each time. Not physically, just spiritually. Like the forest knows what you're doing and resents you for it. One night you hear music. Actual music. Faint and far away, like someone playing a flute beneath the snow. You follow it? Of course you do. You walk into the woods, breath puffing, feet numb. You find nothing. But when you return, your cheeks are pink with cold and your mother's arms are warm with relief. She doesn't even scold you. The village begins whispering again, about who might not make it to spring. It's cruel but not unkind, just realistic. You stop correcting people when they say if instead of when. You carve small notches into the wall near your bed, one for each day survived. It starts to look like tally marks from a prison wall. Maybe it is. The fire dims again. You feed it the last of the dry kindling and promise yourself tomorrow you'll find more. But for now, you close your eyes and pretend the silence is safety. It's late winter, and by now, you've become an expert in enduring things you never asked for. Your clothes have fused into a single permanent outfit of wool, leather, and something vaguely moldy. You haven't seen green in months. Even your dreams are gray. But there's something stirring. Mainstream historical fact. By late February or March, medieval households typically ran out of preserved food from the previous harvest, a period known grimly as the lean season or hungry gap. Every morning you check the horizon for signs. A dripping icicle, a softer breeze, the feel of sun on your cheek that doesn't bite immediately. You begin to believe you'll see spring again, not soon but someday. The village feels thinner. Faces you used to pass without thinking are gone now. You remember them by the footprints left in snow that no longer gets disturbed. Your neighbor's cottage is sealed tight. No smoke from the chimney. You stop knocking. You find a single sprout pushing through the crusted dirt by the church wall. It's green, defiant, almost smug. You kneel and stare at it like it's a holy relic. You don't pick it, just whisper, "Thank you," and shuffle away. Quirky tidbit. Some medieval villagers believed the first flower of spring should be kissed, not picked, or it would bring rain for 40 days. You kiss it just in case. Historians still argue whether these rituals were meant to influence the weather or to soothe the soul after months of silent dread. Your brother gets his appetite back. He gnaws bark less and even makes a joke about your cooking. You smile like it's a normal day, like you're just two siblings bickering over soup, not surviving history. And then one afternoon the snow begins to melt. Not drip, melt. Fast and sudden. It turns the road into mud and slush, which you greet like an old friend. Your boots sink and squeak and your toes are wet, and you've never been happier to feel uncomfortable. A few brave birds return. Not a chorus, just a scout party. They chirp like they own the place. Your mother cries quietly while stirring the soup. Not because of the birds, just because they're still singing. You help rebuild the fence that collapsed in the frost. Just pointless. Nothing needs fencing in or out yet. But it's something to do. Something to claim back. The snowdrops appear next. Then crocuses. You recite their names like spells. Life's returning, petal by petal. The priest holds a special service to welcome the thaw. He doesn't even ask for coins. Just stories. Everyone goes. It's part ceremony, part grief group, part cautious celebration. You sit close to your neighbors, not for warmth but for company. Feels foreign and lovely. There's no feast. Not yet. But someone brings bread made with old flour and pine nuts. Someone else passes around a weak cider. You clink cups and pretend not to notice the coughs and limp hands. You're all here. That's enough. Quirky tidbit. Some villagers believed spring was an argument between the goddess of light and the spirit of frost. The longer the winter, the louder the fight. You think maybe this year light just won the round. Later that night, you walk home alone and find your mother has left a candle in the window for you. It's not cold anymore, not really. Not compared to what you've known. You crawl into bed with the same wool blankets, the same warped mattress, but this time your toes aren't frozen. Your dreams shift, they're not of survival anymore. Now they're of planting, laughter, bees. You're still poor, still hungry, still uncertain, but alive. And the air no longer bites. Now, dim the lights just a little more. Let your breath slow, and feel the cold of history melt into something warm. So now, as you lie there wrapped in your blanket, safe from frostbite, famine, and the occasional curious wolf, let your breath ease and your shoulders drop. The hardest parts are over, at least in our story tonight. Imagine the snow finally receding, exposing mossy earth and the shy green promise of spring. The kind of spring that isn't loud or dazzling, but gentle, persistent. It tiptoes back into the world one flower at a time, not to make a scene, but to remind you it never forgot how to return. The world you've walked through tonight was cold, cruel, and unforgiving, but it was also filled with quiet resilience. With people who made up stories to survive long nights, who whispered to icicles, kissed flowers, and carved hope into wooden walls. That same softness lives in you too. Let your breathing deepen now. In and out. Slow and quiet. No more shivering wind. No more creaking beams. Just the hush of your own space, the one you get to call your own. Let the weight of history drift off your shoulders like melting snow from a roof. You made it. And tomorrow in our real world, there'll be sunshine, or at least central heating and hot chocolate. Sleep well, brave traveler of the worst of times. And remember, you probably would have survived, but only just.